actually picked it up from the airport. And then, meanwhile, this other guy who called me was trying. I told him, I said, every Chabad, I mean, not every police station has them, and not everyone wanted to give them. But I said everyone could call, and like Chabad rabbis won't mind calling. It's a good thing if it's done. But I said it's expensive it's complicated to get it to Israel. That's the problem. Like you have to create a system. So this guy, random guy, who I know who he is, I never met him, never spoke to him before, but he arranged a system where he'll send labels to everyone who does it, and then you just bring the label, it charges his account, and then it goes to Florida to some guy who does like some import businessman who can send boats or whatever he needs to send to Israel, and then it'll take care of it. So it's kind of cool that it's set up. I don't know if anyone else has vests. They'll have to call and ask. They are somewhere. The expired vests have to go somewhere. They're not. They're not. Okay.
They don't throw them away.
Well, they might throw them away.
Invited me to go with them, so I did. And there are vendors there who sell the plates that go in them.
Yeah.
I didn't look closely, but I assume they sell the vests too.
I'm sure they do, I'm sure they do. But let's say a vest is minimum $500 to $1,000 or whatever it is, and then it's like, so if I get 10 vests, and the police ones are very, very expensive. You can see online how much they cost to regular consumers. That's $10,000 worth of vests or $20,000 worth of vests. So on a big scale, if every police has extra ones and they're willing to send them, then you could be talking about hundreds, thousands of vests potentially that are out there, which Okay. Anyways, let's study. All right. So this is very difficult to study today. Again, there are online some great videos. One of them I remember was made during COVID. Someone taught it really, really well, and he had a computer screen behind him showing each thing. But anyways, the Yereach has two movements. The moon has two movements. So this I remember with when I studied this when I was younger, when I was early teens. The guy brought a bicycle wheel, and then he put the moon on the bicycle wheel. He had a guy in the middle holding a beach ball who was the earth. He had another guy who was a flashlight who was the sun. And then he had the moon, one guy was the moon. But then he put the moon on a bicycle wheel. And he had the bicycle wheel spin around, and then he walked around the earth with the bicycle wheel while the moon is spinning like that. So the moon has two movements. It spins on itself in its own small circle. And so that's called the Emtza Hamasl. That's the name of that orbit of the moon. So the moon is like the bicycle wheel, it's going around. Now I just remember what he showed us is when the moon, when it is in front of you, it looks slower than when it's on the sides. So anyways, Rambam is going to address that nowadays. And then you have it spins in its own movement, which doesn't surround the world. And this thing goes in a bigger orbit, which surrounds the world. And then also, we have what's called the Emtsai, the average movement. Again, the average movement of the moon going around the Earth. And this is called the Emtsai Yereach. So on one day, how much does the moon move? So we have the Emtza Hamasl, Emtza Yereach. One day, how much does it move? It moves 13 degrees, 10 chalakim, and 35 shniyos. Comes out 10 days, is 131 degrees. So again, every 30 days, we'll see soon. Comes out in 10 days, it's going to go 131 degrees, 45 chalakim, and 5 seconds, kuf lam and aleph mem hey nun. And comes out on 100 days, 100 days, you'll have 237 degrees, so you'll have the extra. So now, again, every month, the moon goes around in a full cycle. So every 100 days, you have the extra will be 230 degrees, 37 degrees, 8 and 38 chalakim, and 23 shniyos.
So these two numbers shouldn't add up to 360?
No, because we're talking about 10 days and 100 days, right? 100 days is really 3 months and 10 days. So, yeah. So, and the moon, right? The full cycle of the moon is 28 and a half days.
But it still has to, we're talking about the period that the moon, its sphere, brings it around full circle.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So,
But
now,
isn't it full circle 360?
yes. So now that would be 28 days. It would be 360, right? So let's say we said one day.
So we're saying that it takes more than one revolution to complete a month?
No, so we're saying that the moon, well, we're adding up. We're saying that, again, the moon goes around the earth, and that's what's called the Mahalich Hemtzai. So, now let's look at it. In one day, right, it goes 13 degrees, right? 13 degrees times 28 should be around 360, right?
We're talking, we're talking about the,
So now we
So-
calculated 100 days, right? Where will the moon be in 100 days? Where will the moon be in 1,000 days, right? If
Oh.
each day it travels 13 degrees.
course of 10 days. Oh, my mistake.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so comes out that, and you have 10,000 days, the extra, it'll be on 3 degrees and 58 chalakim and 20 shniyas. So it comes out on 29 days. It'll be 22 degrees, 6 chalakim, and 56 seconds. So it comes out in a regular year, you will have 344 degrees and 26 chalakim and 43 shniyas. So basically, okay, now, so that is all what we call the Mahalach Emtzai. So that would all be calculated technically if the moon was not on its own orbit, right? That would be where the moon would be and how far the moon would travel if it's not on its own orbit. Now we have the Emtza HaMasl. The Emtza HaMasl means the moon's on its own path.
Can I ask-
Yeah.
I left my notebook at home. He's saying there's two orbits.
Yeah. One around Earth and one around its own center.
So the Earth is here. So the moon is traveling in a small orbit, but then it's traveling in a
Yeah,
larger.
yeah.
Why does where does this smaller orbit come from?
I mean, that's the moon's movement. Like that's the moon's movement. So the moon is like, imagine a bicycle wheel going like that. So now, where does you see that? When you look into the sky, you should be able to see that. As I said before, when you see the moon's, we're going to calculate it now. And the Rambam essentially here, he doesn't really go into, I never studied, someone told me it's basic trigonometry and geometry if you can figure out how the moon works. But, so the moon basically, when it moves, it's moving like this.
Now, but modern secular astronomy doesn't show that.
I don't
So
know.
I'm just curious why they must have an observation. They're doing this by dead reckoning. I mean, they're just looking in the sky.
Well, so they're
And-
doing that by tradition and also, so I'm not sure exactly how to calculate it. And yeah, I don't know.
I'm just curious why. I've never heard this before. That the moon kind of wobbles as it goes around this. Never
Yeah,
mind.
so I'm not sure. Okay, now you have the Emtza HaMasl on one day is 13 degrees. Okay, I'm sorry. So Emtza HaMasl on one day is 13 degrees, 3 chalakim, and 54 shniyos. Comes out in 10 days, so the Rambam goes through the calculations. So of all those different things. So it comes out in 29 days. The extra will be 53, 4.
Skip it.
All right, yeah, I skipped all those calculations. So I'm going to stop here,
Oh,
just
okay.
because it gets kind of confusing. But anyways, the Rambam, to calculate it, he tries to get as precise as possible. As I said before, when you're looking at the bicycle wheel, when the moon is relative to Earth is on the side of the wheel, even though it's traveling the same speed, it travels faster as opposed to when it's on the front or the back. So the Rambam puts those things in order to calculate exactly where the moon is. Yeah, I'm not sure about that orbit in science or.
Well, he's basing what he's doing here on Greek astronomy, right?
And also what he observes in the sky. He is also looking in the sky. The Rambam is also looking in the sky
Is
himself.
this stuff he's told me? So is he basing any
Yeah.
as well as on the top?
Yeah. So what he says is he said there was an absolute Jewish tradition, and then it was kind of semi-forgotten. So what happened was there's a bunch of different opinions suddenly about the Jewish tradition, and a lot of it is affected by modern science because people were trying to fit it in, and et cetera, and so people lost the Jewish tradition. So what he says, I'm correcting one that works. I'm correcting the Jewish tradition through modern science to show something which is just not. This is going to be acceptable mathematically and
Yeah,
astronomically.
I'm not trying to tear.
Yeah, no, I understand. So I don't know the moon's movement. Regardless, I mean, we'll have to understand the Rambam when he says that he's seeing something. So he actually seeing something with his equipment. So we'll have to, he's actually seeing something. So we'll have to explain what he's seeing.
Yeah,
And it actually works out. In other words, the Rosh Chodesh and everything.
The reality is we're all looking at the same thing.
Correct. And
we have two different theories of why it works the way it does. So the accuracy is not in question.
Yes. So we have to figure out, in other words, if science doesn't believe in that movement, that means if science doesn't follow that movement, we'll have to understand how they do explain the calculations down here.
And I'm just curious. Well, anyway, I'm taking it at face value. I'm not trying to undermine it. But I'm curious about it because what's out there is out there. So modern science and medieval science are looking at the same thing.
So it is a really interesting perspective in like Torah and the Rambam. It's like science is really easy to say, oh, okay, that's old and medieval, and brush it off. But in Judaism, we're going to say, no, we're going to stand by the Rambam and show, the Rebbe is always going to stand.
Understand things.
All right, so we're doing this mimer.
I have this somewhere.
Chapter 2.
It's not organized.
Do you have two of them? Or we're on page 4, yeah. Page 4.
I don't think. Do I?
I'm just curious. I didn't. Maybe David took one home with him. Okay.
I'll see.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Okay, we're on page 4.
Divine Havaya is mentioned?
Yeah. So we're on page 4 at the bays. So this was our question last week. We spoke about the blessing from Jacob from Isaac to Jacob. So we said, what's the blessing he gives? He says that may God give you from the dew of the heavens and the fat of the earth. And the Rebbe brought up a famous question that many ask. Why does it say the blessing comes from Elokim and not from Havaya? Havaya is usually the blessing given in the Torah, the Kohanim blessing, Yivrecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, may God bless you and guard you. We usually use the name Havaya. Havaya means for the world, that's where it comes from. So when we're looking for the Elokim perspective, Elokim is like the God of nature. As God is in nature, everything is God. So now when you're looking at Elohim, God is hidden, right? But God is here. Everything is God, but we don't see it as God because it's his power we see, right? So that's Elohim. Havaya is God himself, higher than the world. He creates something from nothing. So when we usually give a blessing, we usually say, may Havaya give you this thing. In other words,
God himself.
we want a miracle. We don't want like the doctors should heal you scientifically. We prefer if you were healed non-scientifically, right? And if you're scientifically, the doctors can't heal you, we don't say like, oh, sorry. We say, no, may God give them the power to heal you, and it's from a supernatural place. So, yeah.
So would it be fair to say God directly in Havaya, but God indirectly through
Somewhat, yeah.
Elohim,
Yeah, correct.
sort of.
Yeah, so correct. I mean, Elohim is in Bria, Yetzir, Asiya. Havaya we will study about this next week is in Atzilus. So when we look at the world, Elohim, because it's indirect, there's a lot of times where we'll say like, wow, the miracle in Gaza. And we say, no, that was the soldiers. Well, no, it was really God. Everything's God. Who do you
God
think?
working through
Who do
the
you think creates the soldiers, right?
Right.
So when God works through the soldiers, right, then some people might be confused and say it's the soldiers and not God because he's working through the soldiers. On the other hand, when Havaya works, which really Havaya is always working, right? When Havaya works, then we say, no, it was the soldiers, but really it was God. Look, and the soldiers might even say like, I don't even,
I understand the concept.
yeah. Yeah, just give me a second. No. So yes, that's so the question is why is he giving the blessing from Elohim? Now, if you look at it, I mean, this is really important because first of all, in the most important Jewish prayer, we say Shema Yisrael, Havaya Elokeinu, right? Now, what are we really saying? We're really saying something quite powerful. We're saying for Jewish people, our real source of energy is Havaya, and Havaya is Elokeinu. So, really, at times of war and stuff like that, the Rebbe always spoke about, a lot of times we tend to underestimate the power of doing mitzvahs and prayer. But really, when we do mitzvahs and prayer, it's more powerful than what we actually... So there's like hundreds of videos of soldiers on WhatsApp saying messages. Many of them say, hey everybody, we love the toothpaste you sent and, from toiletries you sent from America, but we need tefillin. We need you to put tefillin on because, the toothpaste and toiletries that we have and those comforts are really good and important, but relative to the spiritual value of Jewish people doing mitzvahs, right? And some of them know that, some of them don't know that. But what I'm trying to bring out is so
when we do a mitzvah, it's a way of drawing God down.
Transcendent. It's almost like a statement that we're saying, God, we know that it's not our efforts that do good in the world. It's not our physical effort. It's really our spiritual effort. And our physical efforts are only catalysts to the spiritual effort. So, that's really important in Yiddishkeit. So that's what we're saying when we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu, right? Havaya Elokeinu. We say it in every blessing. What we're recognizing is there's one, level.
Well, we're invoking both of them.
So what we're doing is we're saying Havaya, the transcendent God, is really our Elokeinu. Elokeinu, which is the God of this world, so to speak, which is invested in this world, which runs this world. Like you could say, thank you, God, for giving me all these fruits and vegetables, which I grew, right? But when you make a bracha, what you're saying, really the energy in these vegetables that I'm eating are really transcendent. They're really beyond the world. They're really from God. My energy really comes from God. And what you're doing is you're invoking that Havaya is really Elokeinu. In other words, the rules of nature in the world are really nothing. They're really just created by Havaya.
Well, that, I never thought about it.
So now, let's say, always the example of working on Shabbos. When you say, I got to work on Shabbos because God needs me to live, and I need money to work on Shabbos, and I need to eat on Shabbos. I need to eat, so I need to work. That's Elokeinu. You're admitting God does it. But when you don't work on Shabbos, what you're saying is, no, the sustenance I get from my own work really comes from Havaya. It really is transcendent. The energy that I have in this world is really from God. It's not through a middleman. So what you're saying when you don't work on Shabbos, you're saying my Elokeinu, my work, my following the rules of nature, is really Havaya. It's really coming directly from God. And that's why when you don't work on Shabbos, you're blessed with more. And that's why Jewish people, when we do mitzvahs, we're blessed with more. Because when we tap into the transcendent energy, we get more than the natural energy. So that's what you're going to say. I'm sorry for cutting you off. Lord. Now, Lord is Elokeinu. It's always translated as Lord. Lord means the one who's in control of the world. So there's a world, and he's in control of the world. So what we're saying is our Lord, which is like in control of the world, which runs nature, is really Havaya. He's really not. So that's the same thing we say, Havaya Elokeinu and Shema. We're saying our Lord, the energy that runs the world, is really transcendent. It really doesn't need to follow any rules of the world.
But if we invoke, so this is a digression.
So again, we're not invoking two names. We're saying one name is really a higher name. It's really transcendent. We're saying Havaya is Elokeinu.
Then why say Elokeinu?
Because Elokeinu is the God which we see invested in this world, right? So there's some people in the world who say, okay, God is invested in this world, so I need to follow the ways of the world, right? When we say Havaya is Elokeinu, we're saying no. Really, the world is really run. The world, the way we see the world, the natural order of the world, it's really run by Havaya. It's really a created thing by Havaya. It's really transcendent. There's much more purpose in the world than what we see. God, the limitations we see in the world aren't really real. They're really Havaya. Really, just God created them out of His own will.
They're manifestations of God.
They're really manifestations of a transcendent God.
So what, if we say, when we say Adonai, we're saying Havaya.
Yeah, well, so we can't really say Havaya nowadays because we don't have the full revelation. But when we say Adonai, we are expressing as much as we can Havaya.
So I'm still not, Havaya. Why can't I say Baruch Atah Adonai, Borei Kuyavah?
The reason is because we primarily relate to Elokeinu. We see Elokeinu more. That's what we see. And our job as Jewish people is to recognize that what we call Elokeinu, which is God running the world, is really from the transcendent one God. It's not really. So when we say it, we're actually, what we're doing is we're over here and we're trying to draw down up here, and that's our job as Jews, is to draw Havaya into Elokeinu, to bring out and that's what oneness of God is.
Has manifestations in the world that we have to recognize as being holy.
Well, yeah. So, like, let's say we wouldn't say Havaya. So then we would say, like, okay, God created the world, but He doesn't really care about us so much. He created the world. He put a battery and He put energy in the world, and the world runs. And nice guys finish last. It's godly, but that's the way the world is.
He went on to the next thing.
That's the way. Yeah, He's not really doesn't really care. When we say Havaya Elokeinu, we're saying no. Elokeinu, the world which looks like it's running on its own path, is not really. Really, God's in every detail. He really cares about every detail. So now when we eat something, what we're doing is we're taking the opportunity to recognize that Havaya is really Elokeinu. And everything we do, actually, every blessing we do, we're trying to recognize that Havaya is Elokeinu, and that really God is present in the world. Really, the whole world is really nothing. The rules of the world are really just godly choice, God's will. So that's kind of where you're giving a blessing. Most blessings in the Torah we find are from Havaya. Let God make miracles. And so then to answer it, we said, well, we find two blessings right near each other that both come from Elokeinu. One is it says, Elokeinu blessed Isaac. And one of them says, Isaac blessed Jacob. He says, V'yitin lecha Elokim. May Elokim give you these things. We will explain this based on what is brought in the Siddur of the Alter Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe, the Siddur we have today, dates back to the Alter Rebbe. Now, what is unique about the Siddur? You can read it in the beginning of the Siddur, which is interesting. The translator of the Siddur, something would happen in the news, which I guess wasn't so covered last week because of Israel. Lived on my block in Crown Heights when I lived in Crown Heights. He's 90 years old. He's an Auschwitz survivor. He was a child. There were just a few children in Auschwitz who survived for whatever reason to be experimented on. So last week he traveled to Auschwitz with about 100 children and grandchildren. Most of them are Chabad shluchim and stuff like that. He's a Chabad rabbi. He traveled there to Auschwitz and he took a big family picture right in front of Auschwitz. He gave his family a tour. They did like a heritage trip because it was his 90th birthday. And it's cute, you see him putting tefillin on people in Auschwitz, they're visitors, different Jewish visitors and everything like that. But he just traveled last week, and he traveled with his whole, I don't know if every relative made it there, but he has several sons and many, many grandchildren, maybe more than 100, I don't even know. There's a huge family picture of his whole family there. So, he translated the Siddur. In the forward of the Siddur, what's unique about the Chabad Siddur is the Alter Rebbe basically, in the Siddur, there's a lot of different nuances about, and they're based on the Arizal's intentions. So if you say it this way or that way, well, it depends on what you're thinking. So the Arizal wrote at great length, or his students wrote, what to think when you're praying. So the Alter Rebbe says, I worked very carefully to write down a nusach, which is based on what the Arizal says what to think. And he said, although not everyone will know what to think, but they can at least say it the best way that the Arizal would want. And they can say, may God align all the spiritual intentions with the way I'm saying it. So over there, so this is called the Siddur. Now in the Siddur, this is in the section called the Shara Techiyos. So the Alter Rebbe has a section there, a long section about shofar, what intentions to have when you blow the shofar. What kavanas do you have when you blow the shofar? So the Alter Rebbe, he writes, Shashpam Shachas Magvuros, he gedoyle yoiser, me'ashpam Shachas Machasadim. He says, the hashpa. So hashpa is a flow of influence. Hashpa is interesting because hashpa means to give something. You can give something, or also the word the Rebbe always spoke about getting a mentor is a mashpia, someone who influences. So the hashpa, the influence from gevuros, is greater than the influence from chasadim. So the next class next Monday is about this kind of, but it's all related. So
hashpah is related to mashpia.
Hashpah is related to mashpia, same root word. A mashpia gives hashpah. And then you have chesed and gvura. So this is an interesting subject. Generally speaking, so you have God's emotions and human emotions. There's one emotion which is called chesed. Chesed means to give. Gvura actually literally means strength. It's considered the opposite of chesed. Chesed means to give to everybody. Gevura means to be strong, literally, but it means to also be strict. Judgment comes from Gevura. So, some people are overly kind, and some people are overly strict. Now, strict means to be it's a lot harder to say no than yes. Strict means to be very, very strong. So the Alter Rebbe says, that is all true. Usually, Gevura means not to give. Usually, when you're judgmental, you don't give. You say, show me exactly what you're doing with every dollar, right? You might be even overly strict about it. But the Alter Rebbe says, when a Gevura wants to give, decides to give, it gives much more. Because it's the ability of strength. So usually Gevura is expressed by restricted power, because restrict is harder than to reveal and to manifest and to give. However, he says Gevura potentially has the ability to give much more than chesed. So it's sometimes you have people that are very, very difficult to convince to do Jewish things. But when they do it, they go from not putting tefillin on ever to putting it on every day, because they have to put it on every day. Sometimes you have someone who is battling and they're very, very strict, but in the times of war, Specifically, they break through all the barriers to do. So that's what Gevura is. Why is that? The reason is because chasadim heim b'teva kakrirus. The chasadim, the attributes of kindness, is a lot of times cold. And therefore their hashpa is limited. Chasadim b'teva kakrirus. L'chen hashpa mehem hi b'hagbala. Ma'chein kin Gevura shehem b'chamimus. On the other hand, Gevura is sometimes heated. So this is, I'll just give an example from, okay. Okay, so this is very interesting, but it's like a lot of times people who are the most kindest people giving tzedakah, they don't have to be convinced, but they always give a set amount, right? No matter what. So they'll be like, line up. Hey, I want to tell you, we're helping orphans, whatever it is. They'll be like, here, so they give. I don't care what you're doing. Here's what it is. Take it. I want to say I've never collected from them, but I remember in LA, there's guys on Purim, wealthy guy in LA. The whole day, he has a line going down the block giving out checks to people. And each person, $500, or $1,000, each person. Extremely wealthy person, extreme Baal Tzedakah, right? But then he has certain things where he had to be convinced. Those are his causes. He's convinced that he'll give anything to. So here we're saying chesed, kindness, a lot of times comes with coldness. It's like, I remember when before I moved to here, someone said, "Oh, go ask that guy, this wealthy guy in Crown Heights. He likes to help new shluchim. He'll give you a donation because I had to collect money to move." So I go to him and he gave $500 cash, whatever it is. So I said, "Where should I send the receipt?" He said, "Send it to God." He didn't ask my name. He didn't ask where I'm moving. He didn't ask anything. He sent it to God, right? So on one hand, that's a really big quality, to be able to trust another Jew and give him, doesn't matter why. But sometimes you want someone to understand where it's going, because you want them to say, how much do you need? You want them to feel what percentage they're giving, right? So that's the difference between chesed and gevura. Sometimes a restrictive person is prone to actually give more and break out of the system more than a kind person. So that's what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. He's saying even though gevura doesn't usually give anything, when he does give, he breaks out. So that's okay. So now. So that is these two qualities here. So Gevura is important to remember, as you'll see next week. So next week we're going to get into the emotions. This week, yesterday we talked about, this week we spoke about what's called the levushim. The levushim are the clothing, so the thought, speech, and action. When we get into the emotions, we're going to talk about some people have chesed, some people have Gevura. And ultimately the next class is going to say, what does it help if you know your emotions, if you can't change them? If you can't change your nature? It helps that you know what your mission in life is. You know what your challenges are going to be. So that's what. So now the Alter Rebbe continues. I'm going to stop in like 2 minutes because I know there's a lot of things to do today.
Understood.
The Alter Rebbe continues and he says, "Shalom mitzino brachas kelev Avram v'lev Yaakov ki yitzchak gvura. V'lachen brachas yitzchak v'rev gadol." So in fact, we don't find Avram has the blessings from Elokim, and now Elokim is God's restrictiveness. He follows rules. God decides to follow his own rules. That's restricting himself. So Yitzchak actually represents Gvura. Avram is Chesed. He's kindness. So Avram actually, we find that he gave to everybody. He traveled around giving to everybody. Yitzchak is Gvura. However, the blessings that are given to Yitzchak, Heim B'Riba Gadol, those are the biggest blessings. So Elokim, now we're going to explain. Usually Elokim means restrictive, but deep within Elokim, in God's power to hold himself back is actually his strength. And that's why actually when you can tap into God's energy and strength and use it out in a way of giving, it's the biggest blessings. So we'll stop here.
So that's generosity.
So it's actually generosity is an interesting thing, and every Chabad rabbi will tell you. I don't know if every Chabad rabbi will tell you, but usually